started. I'd like to thank everyone for participating today in our monthly webinar series. Our topic today is timesheets. Some of what we will review today is things that you are familiar with. Hopefully you walk away from this session having picked up a tip or trick that you can use going forward. My name is Ron Bro. I'm a VP of Client Services for TopStep, and I'll be walking through the slide deck today. Once we get through the slide deck, we'll open it up for Q&A at the end of the session for as many questions as we have. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, for our agenda today, we're going to talk about a number of timesheet options. So alerts, reports, controlling periods, some fields you can add to the timesheet entry, the time entry tab, and approvals, overlapping timesheets, adjustments will be the main topics. There's actually a couple other items I've threw into the back of the slide deck, so we'll call those surprise items as we get through this deck. So we're going to start with alerts. I'm sure everyone uses the alerts in some form or fashion in order to remind users that a timesheet is coming up due, that it's overdue, making sure your approvers are updated when they are overdue in their approval. So a couple of items you may or may not know about timesheet alerts. You could have multiple timesheet alerts, could set up based on different time zones. So if you have organizations spread across different time zones in the U.S. or globally, you want to make sure that you'll have multiple alerts for each time zone to make sure that everyone's getting alerted at the proper time. To do this, to have those multiple alerts, you definitely need to make sure the organization is structured in a way that you can filter so that only the folks needing those alerts can do that. Department is a great way to do that. To make sure that you only alert those folks in that area. Timesheet required is a great option for making sure that only people that are required to enter time are getting those alerts. I laugh because I do work for a lot of customers, and I get alerts every Friday that my time is overdue. And it's interesting because obviously I don't enter time, but it's because they're not taking advantage of these timesheet required. So timesheet required is a great way to make sure you control that. One of the things we're seeing more and more with customers is they are really encouraging daily time entry. This is a great way to ensure that accuracy, to find problems if there are prior to Friday or Monday morning, and also a way for project managers to get real-time data about their projects. So there is a way that you can do daily timesheet alerts. So having an alert go out, looking at the day to make sure time was entered, and if not, send out an alert to remind the user to put in their time. Timesheet rules. This is something I have a lot of customers use as well, and this basically allows you to require a percent of your work schedule. So if you are an 8-hour-a-day person, making sure that you're entering at least 40 hours a week on your timesheet, and as well as for part-time folks being able to make sure they're putting in their hours correctly as well. Advanced reporting, everyone is using, I'm sure, the timesheet status report. It's a great report for not only reviewing whose timesheet is missing, what timesheets are in an open or submitted state. If it's in a submitted state, who are the approvers that you're waiting on to approve the timesheet. That's very useful. So, everyone has, their organization has a timesheet czar generally, the person who's responsible for monitoring timesheets, and this report is invaluable to those folks playing that role. So let's talk about timesheet periods. As you probably know, when you were implemented, you were chosen. How do you want to structure your timesheets? I don't have any customers doing daily timesheets from a submit and approve perspective, although I do have them entering time daily. Weekly is probably the most common timesheet period, obviously semi-monthly and monthly. one thing you may or may not have known is that there is a control that allows you to set the timesheet period down to the user level. So if you have multiple, we have one country that wants to do semi-monthly versus the U.S. wants to do weekly, then you can actually enable that switch and set at a user level what their timesheet period will be. This could be very useful, again, for large organizations trying to accommodate the requirements across the entire enterprise. Note this does not cause any issues if you are having this type of multi-period within your timesheet module. When you're reporting on time, OpenAir is looking at the days, so it doesn't matter if it's daily, weekly, etc. You're always able to report down at the day level, and that will not cause any problems. Open Periods is something I have a lot of customers using, and what Open Periods does is it allows you to close timesheet periods. This is an interesting feature. It does require a little bit of administration and some TLC, but what you do is you say these are the periods that people can enter their time, and now no one can enter time into this period. It controls the ability to keep those old timesheets from popping up out of the blue, and forces someone needing to enter time in the past to have to go through their OpenAir administrator or someone in the finance team to get permission to enter time in that period. And then that period can be opened just for that person. It doesn't have to be open for the entire organization. So for a lot of customers, they want to be able to control when the period is open, when the period is closed, and then force the groveling to happen if someone needs to come and request a period be opened. So this is a really nice feature if you are especially if you're integrated with your ERP and you're basing a lot of your revenue recognition based on time. Timesheet grid fields. So often customers are asking, we want to be able to capture additional information on the timesheet, not just the project and the task and the user. So there are a couple of options that allow you to add additional drop-down options when you're entering your time. There's a field called payroll type. This is available under timesheet settings, and it's a standard field, and you can add payroll type to the timesheet. And you can rename payroll type to whatever you need to rename it to in the terminology. Some of the ways I've seen this used is like work location. Am I working in, what state am I working in? Am I on-site or remote? A lot of tax calculations could be based on how much time did we spend in a specific state, so we can determine if we owe taxes in a particular state. You can have a drop-down of roles. So, what role was I playing on this project? I've seen even folks use payroll type instead of tasks. They have a standard drop-down of the different types of activities on a project, and they use that, and it replaces the task feature and use it that way. Again, payroll types can be required in the standard settings, and they are available for reporting in all of the summary reports where you could report on time. The other field is time type. So time type has a few extra options that payroll type doesn't have. What I see with time type is this billable? Is it non-billable? Is it regular time, overtime? Am I on-site or am I remote? So those are time type options that we've seen with other customers. The benefit of time types that payroll types don't have is that you can actually, on a project, you can restrict them. So you can have billable, non-billable, and other options, holiday, vacation, what have you, and say on projects people can only see billable, non-billable, and you can edit those and restrict those. Also, when you're doing billing rules, you can use time types to restrict what gets billed. So again, using the billable, non-billable option, you can say within a billing rule what time types are able to pass through the billing rule. So time types have the benefit of some restrictions that payroll types don't. The issue with time types is just where it gets placed on the timesheet grid. If you're using time types, it's going to be the very first drop down. If you're using payroll types, it's going to be the very last drop down. So sometimes determining what field is getting used may determine where the user wants to put it on the timesheet, unless some of these other more advanced filterings are needed. So here's an example of the limitations. So if you enable the ability to limit time types on a task or on a project, you can now see this is what it would look like in this example. There's a lot of different options, and you can force the end user to only choose from a subset. This can, this really helps in being able to limit mistakes when entering time. Time entry tab. Time entry tab to me is one of the best features OpenAir has ever released. Before this feature existed, and if you wanted to see who did what when, you'd have to go in the report module, open up a detail report, create a time entry detail report, to use all kind of filtering to get the details you need, and it could be time consuming. With the time entry tab now, you can actually drill down into the time entries without generating a report, be able to filter by column, filter using advanced filters. You can see if you have any timesheet custom fields, you can display those in the list view. It's really helpful for folks looking to get data and without having to either run a detail report or start clicking into timesheets. Often if someone needs, if I have to, like we determine later that someone billed the wrong rate across a long period of time, in the past you'd have to go in and drill in timesheets, figure out which timesheets needed to be fixed. Now you can look into time entries and be able to quickly find which ones need to be fixed before you go fix them. You can control time entries through the role. So depending on the role of the individual can determine whether they don't see or they do see what the time entries tab. Here's what it looks like in the new UI. So once you enable this feature, you have that time entries link now. And here you can see all the time entries. It's basically deconstructed timesheets at a line level versus at a timesheet level. Very useful. Let's talk about approvals. Timesheet approvals can be pretty complex. You can generally do more. We always recommend approvals, even if it's a one-person approver. And the reason being, at some point in the organization, it may change. Either that person's going to change, or you need to add additional complexity. And there, you don't have to go in and update hundreds or thousands of projects or users. You can just go in and update the approval, and therefore it will automatically update all the users and projects using that approval process. So a couple things about approval processes you may or may not know. There are sequence fields to control who approves it first, right? So when you're creating an approval process, you can set the person as they're the first approver, then they're the second approver. Approval processes will notify the individual if you want that to happen when the timesheet is entered and submitted. So you have approval notification and other notifications you can set up. You can also have an alternate approver. So if a project manager enters time against their own project, do you want them approving their own time in addition to other folks on the project? You can set the approval process to say if it's the project manager, then the approval goes to their manager, as an example of a way we see customers using the approval processes. Auto approve is really nice. So you may have a manager who says, I only want to be in the approval process if the number of hours is greater than X. So if someone's burning high hours, I want to be in that approval process. Otherwise, what OpenAir will do is just auto-approve for that particular line on the approval process. These can be done not only for hours specific to timesheets, they can be done for expenses and other items where you can set these auto-approve options. Very handy. If you allow your approvers to edit the submitted time, and we have this with a lot of customers where someone submits a timesheet, they made a mistake, they chose the wrong task. There is an option in OpenAir to allow the approver to edit the timesheet. So instead of rejecting it, if the approver knows what they should have chosen, they can then just simply make a change to the timesheet before approving it. Some organizations don't like this approach. Some organizations do like this approach. It just depends on your controls. But if you do allow these submitted timesheets to be edited, on the approval process, you can limit who can edit the timesheet. So I'll show you as a screenshot, I think in the next slide, that shows you how you can control who can edit if you do have this enabled in your account. The last point about approvals is the automatic rerouting. I, again, see this a lot where you have multiple approvers, but the primary is person A, but person A only has X days to approve it. And if person A doesn't approve it, then it gets escalated to person B. What this really controls is alerts. And so person A is the primary. They would get the initial alert of the due process. Once it escalates, then an alert would go to person B. At that point, either A or B can still approve it. And then, again, you can have multiple escalations based on the number of days. So here's what an approval process looks like today. You'll notice in this example, I have two approvers, both meta values, one project owner and one the manager. Now in this case, they're both ones. What does that mean? It means they are both equals in the approval process. You'll see the highlighted area down at the bottom. It says a sequence number requires one approver. So what this means is if one of them approves it, it auto-approves for the other. So if you don't check this box, they both have to approve it. They both get alerts when it's submitted at the same exact time. If you do check this box, they both get alerts, but only one has to approve it, and then from that point on, it's considered approved unless there's another approval process. Scroll to the right of this page, you can see the cannot edit checkbox. This is what we talked about. If someone is allowed to edit a submitted timesheet, you can limit who can edit it in the approval process. The assign after is only visible. You may say, I don't see this on my approval processes. It's not a switch. It basically becomes visible only if you have two approvers with the same sequence number and you have the checkbox at the bottom of the form checked where only one approval is required. So if you have that combination, then this fields pop up. And here you can say the project owner has 1 day, it's always in days, to approve it. And if they don't, then it basically will escalate to the manager. And at that point, either one can approve it. So again, I see this a lot. Not so much with timesheets. I see it a lot with invoices where you have a pool of invoice folks approving invoices on the finance side, and we have a primary with a couple of backups based on time escalations. So again, this can be very handy and used for a variety of business requirements. Additional project-specific approvers. This is a really cool field as well, a really cool feature. I often have have customers ask me, I want to add someone to the project and put them in the approval loop, but they're not the project owner. And this is where this feature this is the reason this feature was enabled. It allows you to identify multiple approvers, up to 3, on a per project basis that are now become meta values in the approval processes without them being the project owner. And you can, once you enable, this is an option that you don't have to request from OpenAir. It's an option that you can enable yourself under the approval options under the global settings. Once you turn this on, 3 approval fields pop up right underneath the approval processes on your project field. Now, all these are available in the terminology section. So if you're going to say project approver 1 is the business development manager. So you can rename these. You can hide the ones you're not going to be using. So if you don't need 3, you just hide the other 2. And here you enter, for each project you could enter who the business development manager is for that project. Then you can then add them to your approval processes. And it's a way to get the additional set of folks into the process, and very handy. I see this a lot with, again, invoicing as well as timesheets, where you can bring in additional folks that are not either the client owner or the project owner. And these will all be available in the approval processes that you set up. If you enable this and you set up your business development manager as approver 1, but you don't enter a value, it will just auto-approve. So it looks to see if there's a person there, similar to if there was no project manager or owner. It would just auto-approve once it gets the timesheet gets submitted for those approvals. So this is what it looks like when you enable these additional approvers. So you get these 3 options down below the project approver section of the project. And then you can then see here project approver 1 can be added into the approval process. You'll see in this example. One of the complaints we get is if you are a project owner and you've got multiple projects and multiple resources, and those resources are entering time across multiple of projects that you own on a same timesheet, out of the box, OpenAir will send that project owner multiple emails, even though they're the owner of all the projects on the timesheet. So obviously monitoring how much auto emails go out is something you want to be concerned about. You don't want to have folks start to ignore those or get aggravated that they're being spammed by OpenAir. There is an option to consolidate the option to perform approvals in one step. So what this does is, if the project owner, have 3 projects and a resource on all 3 projects enters all 3 projects on their timesheet, when they submit their timesheet, instead of me getting 3 alerts, I get 1 alert. And then when I go to approve that timesheet, I'm approving all 3 projects at once. I don't have to approve 1, then approve same timesheet for the 2nd project, and then the same timesheet for the 3rd project. So it allows the reviewer to see all the time entries. You can approve them there. You can also filter within the timesheet views to see if you want to specifically look at one project versus another, and be able to, before approving it, be sure that you're approving the right amount of hours. So again, this can be very helpful if you have that scenario that I described with multiple project owners, multiple projects, all sharing the same resources. Line item rejection. This one I see a lot of customers that are doing T&M, time-based billing. And the thought here was, I've got a timesheet and I've got 5 project lines on my timesheet and 1 internal project, and the internal project time is incorrect, or they chose the wrong activity or task. So now you've got to reject the entire timesheet so they can fix their internal time. Meanwhile, the project time that was correct is held up from being able to be approved ultimately and being billed. So this line item rejection allows you to reject a single line of the timesheet and approve the rest. Now what this does is it basically splits the timesheet apart. So if you reject a line or two, approve a line or two, basically you now have, where it was 1 week's timesheet, you now have 2. The alerts happen the same as a rejected timesheet would happen. And the individual then would go in and fix the line item rejected part of the timesheet, and then resubmit it for approval just like they would a standard rejected timesheet. A lot of customers, like I said, benefit from this because they want billing to occur as quickly as possible and they don't want this to hold it up. I see this a lot with also expense reports, same concept, where they don't want to reject, they want to hold up billing all the expenses for one erroneous entry. You can also reject multiple lines at one time. So you can see here in this screenshot, now when you enable this, you have the approve or reject at a line-by-line level. If you choose to reject, you have to enter a reason at a line-by-line level. And then you approve, reject the items, and then again it does fragment the timesheet and alert the end user that their timesheet, part of the timesheet has been rejected. Some customers don't like this because of the way it splits the timesheet, but the benefit, there's a couple of options you have here. You can rejoin the timesheet back once all the timesheet is approved. So you can rejoin the line items back to the original timesheet and remove the fragmented timesheet. These are settings, additional switches that you can enable to be able to rejoin these. And one thing note, the rejoined timesheet must then be approved as a whole. It removes the individual time entry approval for billing. So keep that. If you're thinking about doing this, we do recommend that you turn this on and play with it in a sandbox to make sure it behaves the way that you are hoping it does. Overlapping timesheets. So overlapping timesheets allow you to enter 2 timesheets for the same period. Customers use this for a variety of reasons. Mostly where I see overlapping timesheets coming into play is when you have, for your billing based on time, or you are doing revenue based on percent complete, and you only want to consider the hours for the month when you're generating revenue or generating billing. So when a month end falls midweek, so let's say the month end falls on a Wednesday, if you don't have some month end features enabled, then you would have to wait for the enter time for the whole month. Some customers, instead of worrying about these month end, they just redefine their calendar, doing custom time ranges, changing them to a 4-4-5, where they do 4-week, 4-week, 5 weeks. Which a lot of companies do, and that eliminates the whole month-end concern. Some customers, say, okay, we need your time entered by the 31st. We know there are 2 days on the timesheet. We just go ahead and estimate what you're going to do, and we'll go back and fix it later if it's not actuals. And then what I mentioned earlier is the 2 timesheets, one for the the end of the last month, and one for the beginning of the next month, all within the same week. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. There's a couple of switches you'll want to look at. So for the 2 timesheets, the overlapping timesheets are used. If you disable, you can only have 1 timesheet per time period. So if you disable overlapping timesheets in your settings, then you do not have the option to use this feature. One concern that, there was a couple of switches that were enabled, but before they were, the issue was there was nothing to keep a person from putting time in the whole timesheet. So what OpenAir did was they came up with a couple of settings that help police this policy, which basically one of them says you can only enter time in on a timesheet in a single month. So when you create a timesheet and it is a month-end timesheet, you can choose to enter time for the current month, you can choose to enter time for the next month, but you cannot enter time both for both months on the same timesheet. So that was really helpful for maintaining this. Also, once you do enter time and submit it and then create an overlapping timesheet, it will lock out the previous month's time. So you cannot enter time when you've already entered time for a period. So here's what it looked like. If we take the example of the end of July, you can see that the 31st fell on a Thursday with the 1st falling on a Friday. So this organization, basically they submitted a timesheet on the 31st for 8 hours, and then they created an overlapping timesheet that then allowed them to enter time for the Friday and Saturday. So that's what this looks like from the end user perspective. You can see that those fields are grayed out because they're not being allowed of time entry. Timesheet adjustments. Timesheet adjustments are really helpful if you're doing time billing and you realize after the time has been run through billing that you've got a mistake. Either the wrong project or the wrong task was chosen. Then in the past, it became quite a nightmare to fix this before adjustments were available. You'd have to go find the time, you'd have to pull it off the invoice, you'd have to delete it, and you'd have to do that for all time entries that were billed on a single timesheet, because you can't edit a timesheet that has any time on it that's billed. It was just a nightmare. What this does is really shortcut that hole. Now, there's a few options for adjusting a timesheet. One, if the time has not been billed, you can unapprove the timesheet. So this is really helpful for customers that their billing is done at the end of the month. They do auditing throughout the month to make sure their billing is correct, and they realize someone made a mistake. They basically can go in, unapprove the timesheet, and then get the end user to fix it, or proxy in as the end user to fix it, and then resubmit it for approval. So it will go back through the approval process, but for only the items that were changed. Again, this is only timesheets that have yet to be processed if you're doing time billing. If you're doing any fixed fee milestone billing, a timesheet can pretty much be unapproved at any point for fixing errant time entries. You can do an overlapping timesheet. So an overlapping timesheet, as we discussed, creates a second timesheet for the same period. You could create a second timesheet and you could say, okay, well, I'm going to put negative hours on this day for this project and put positive hours for this day. At the end of the day, the amount of hours on the timesheet is generally equal to 0, but it creates negative and positive amounts. And again, this requires you to proxy in as the end user generally, and enter the information for them, and it does require reapproval once you do it. Now, again, this can be done if the time billing has occurred and you want to create reversing charges to offset incorrect billing, as well as create positive charges to create the correct billing. Adjusting it is really the best way once the time has been billed, because you can go in and adjust it. It doesn't require any proxying. You just have to have in your role the permission to adjust the timesheet. So there's a couple of additional information and screenshots here. You can only adjust an approved timesheet, obviously, and it is an internal switch. So if you don't have it enabled, it's something you want to look at. You will need to ask OpenAir to turn this on in your account. Basically, it allows you to go into an approved timesheet, edit, click the timesheet, hit the edit box, and then click on the little comment gray icon on the left. And then if you have this enabled, you'll see adjust this timesheet. Once you click that adjust, it will basically take the timesheet and open it up for editing. Now here you can go in and say, okay, I'm going to move 8 hours from this day to this day, or I'm going to move 8 hours from this project task to this project task. So you go in and you basically fix the timesheet, and then you save it, and then at this point you have a couple of options. You could submit it if you want it to be approved again. There's also an additional switch that forces adjusted timesheets to auto-approve, no matter whether the approval process is. I find this really useful as well, because you may be in a hurry to do billing. You don't want to have to wait on approval processes because you know what you're fixing is correct. Usually it's someone in finance or an administrator that's going in because they've been told to fix this a certain way. So having it go auto-approve allows you to go in and immediately run the billing rules, generate the correcting charges, generate the corrected charges, and then be able to then do your rebill. It does create a second timesheet, and you can see which timesheets have been adjusted within the timesheet list view. So you can see in this example, it prefixes the timesheet period with the adjusted in brackets. So you can see, you can get pretty, it can get pretty fun with these. You can actually adjust an adjusted timesheet, and you can adjust an adjusted timesheet. So and you can delete an adjusted timesheet as well. So just like a timesheet, you can unapprove it as long as it hasn't been billed, and then you can delete it as well if you make a mistake and adjust something that's doesn't need to be adjusted. So those last few items I've been through have been available in OpenAir for quite a while. The next couple of things I want to walk through are fairly new. One is fairly new, and one is not even out yet, so I wanted to cover it. So scripting. So most of you have probably heard a lot about scripting. What is scripting? What does scripting do? In the May 2014 release this year, timesheet scripting was introduced. What scripting does is basically allow you to do things you could never do before using standard form permissions. And basically you can now trigger scripts based on time entry. So you can trigger a script when you hit save, you can trigger a script when you hit submit, you can trigger a script when you hit approve. So all of those different triggers are now available within scripting to be able to run the scripts that you create. There are two related switches that you need to enable if you are interested in creating scripts within the timesheets. Here's an example of one of our customers who needed some functionality that we couldn't achieve without going the scripting route. Their HR policy requires that they can only enter 4 or 8 hours when they are entering vacation time. So they don't want to allow them to say, only took 3 hours of vacation, only took 2 hours of vacation on their timesheet. Well, OpenAir inherently cannot enforce that. Now, it can be enforced through the approval process, but they wanted it to be enforced at the timesheet entry point, so it didn't have to rely on people to reject timesheets when a timesheet was incorrectly put. So with a script, we were able to generate some real-time errors and visible errors you can see here. So in this example, in the screenshot, I picked vacation, and I entered 3 hours on Wednesday, and I entered 9 hours on Thursday. Well, you can see that when I hit save, it displays errors. It will not let me save this timesheet without entering either 4 or 8 hours in both values. So this is really helpful. There are some other really interesting ways you can use scripting, not only within timesheets but across. I have one customer that when they want the timesheet is submitted, they want a script to go in and evaluate how much time should be coded to overtime, and basically it's going to generate a overtime timesheet, a second timesheet based on the calculations. so that they can they're not forcing the end user to determine how much overtime they worked, but they are having the scripts create that so they get accurate reporting on overtime once the timesheet, and it creates an overtime timesheet, which is very cool, something we're working on right now. But you know, there's a lot of other examples that are out there of things that you just wish you could do that you could not do. Now scripting does open that door a bit. There are some limitations to scripting that we've run across. There's the volume of scripting you need, the number of records you need to evaluate. There's some limitations, but for the scripting that I've run into, which is fairly simple scripting, it is really cool and really can enhance your business processes by the system versus human intervention. The last feature I want to talk about, and then we'll open up for questions, is this is brand new, coming out next week. So we'll see. I can't promise it's going to be in the release. It is listed in the release. It was released in the sandbox. But basically, in the past, you know, you have tasks. You can, if you're using assignments, you assign folks to the task, and they can enter their time as long as the task is not marked closed. Well, what if it's closed for one person but not for another? Well, if you have to enforce that, you basically would need to have two tasks, one for John and one for Susan, and then you can close the task once John is finished, but Susan needs to continue to put her time or expenses there. With this new setting, very exciting, I'm hoping that this works as expected and is part of next weekend's release, you can actually close the task at a user level. Again, this assumes you are using task assignments for allowing time entry. But if you are, and you are interested in being able to control time entry down to the assignment level, this new feature will do that. So very exciting for a number of my customers. I know that once we go through the release and do all our due diligence testing, that we'll be recommending for those customers we work with to take a look at this, and I think it would benefit, cut down on the number of tasks, cut down on incorrect time entries where someone's entering time when they shouldn't because the task should be closed for them. So again, hoping that this is as advertised. So hopefully stay tuned, read your release notes, and if you're interested, have this turned on in your sandbox if you have one, so you can do some testing. So in summary, you know, OpenAir timesheets are generally you know, the basic requirement for any OpenAir user. You know, anyone who has access to OpenAir and they're doing work for customers, generally they absolutely have to put a timesheet in. There's a lot of configuration options, alerts, approval options to really make sure that the timesheets module and features are supporting your business requirements. So it's important to understand what's out there, what's available, what's not available. To take advantage, you want to reduce risk in data entry. So anytime you have humans entering data subject to problems, when you have approvers approving time, it's not guaranteed they'll catch everything. So it's really, if you enable these settings that we talked about, opening and closing periods, etc., then it could really make life easier, get it right the first time, and not be as reactive for time entry issues. And of course, our own commercial, you know, obviously if you are interested in these and you want more information, or if you have other challenges that you have that were not addressed from this slide deck, certainly TopStep would love to talk with you. So our other commercial folks on this call hopefully know who TopStep is and what we do. We really focus on professional service organizations and making sure that you are set up to run your business efficiency. Certainly our website is available with all of our options and certainly contact information.